She told me, maybe we shouldn't be together if you can't handle my ex around. I agreed. And when she texted, "Where are you?" on Friday night, I sent her a selfie from Dubai International, first-class lounge. Job transfer accepted. Ticket one way. I'm not the type of man who keeps score in relationships, but even I have limits. My name is Leonard, 33 years old, a financial analyst who spent years climbing my way up the corporate ladder. For the past 2 years, I had been in a relationship with Sabrina, a woman who seemed to know how to light up every room she walked into. She had charisma, that spark of energy that made people gravitate toward her. When we first met, I thought she was exactly what I needed after years of throwing myself into work. Someone lively, someone spontaneous, someone who could drag me away from spreadsheets and deadlines. At first, I overlooked small things. Sabrina mentioned her ex-boyfriend, Hector, in casual conversation more often than I liked, but I told myself it was harmless. She framed it as part of her past. They had grown up together, she said, and still shared mutual friends. I figured people could stay friends with their exes if they had moved on, so I gave her the benefit of the doubt. But as months turned into years, it became clear that Hector wasn't just part of her past. He was very much a part of her present. It began with little intrusions. A text here, a phone call there. Then group hangouts where Hector always seemed to be invited. I remember one evening when Sabrina and I had planned a quiet dinner at home. She cooked pasta, poured wine, and we were just sitting down when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, smiled, and excused herself. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. When I went to check, she was in the hallway, laughing into her phone. I heard his name. She turned away quickly, muttering something about him going through a tough time. Dinner went cold. Friends noticed too. My colleague Martin once joked that Hector might as well be the third wheel in our relationship. I laughed it off at the time, but his words echoed in my head later. At gatherings, Hector would show up uninvited, claiming Sabrina told him about the event. He acted like he belonged, always too familiar with her, always testing boundaries. She brushed it off as just his personality. The first real crack in the relationship came during a party at a rooftop bar. Sabrina and I had been celebrating a small promotion I'd earned, and she insisted we join some of her friends afterward. When we arrived, Hector was already there. He sat too close to her, whispered in her ear, and the way she smiled at him, different, softer, made my stomach knot. When I confronted her later, she accused me of being jealous and insecure. That word, insecure, stuck with me. It was her favorite defense. If I so much as questioned why Hector had to be at every gathering, why his name lit up her phone late at night, why he still knew the passcode to her apartment door, she would turn it back on me. She painted herself as innocent and me as controlling. Months of this wore me down. I started doubting myself, second-guessing whether I was overreacting. But the pattern never changed. The last straw came on a Wednesday night. I had stayed late at work preparing a client report, and when I got home, I found Hector sitting on Sabrina's couch, eating takeout with her like he lived there. She didn't even look embarrassed. She greeted me casually, introduced him as though we hadn't already met countless times, and carried on like nothing was wrong. That night we argued. For the first time, I didn't hold back. I told her how I felt disrespected, how her constant closeness to Hector crossed lines, how it wasn't about insecurity, it was about boundaries. She listened silently, then put down her glass of wine, leaned back in her chair, and said words that cut sharper than anything before. Maybe we shouldn't be together if you can't handle my ex around. The silence that followed was heavy. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I simply nodded. Maybe you're right. That was it. I saw her expression flicker, maybe expecting me to argue or beg. But I didn't. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. The next day at work, everything changed. My supervisor called me in with unexpected news. The company was opening a new regional office in Dubai. They wanted someone experienced, someone reliable, to oversee the financial side. It was a huge promotion, more responsibility, higher pay, and the chance to build something from the ground up. But it also required relocation within a month. Most people would have hesitated, weighed the pros and cons. For me, it was an answered prayer. Sabrina had drawn her line in the sand. I didn't want to fight for a woman who made me compete with a ghost from her past. The job offer was my chance to leave everything toxic behind. I didn't tell her right away. Instead, I acted normal, going through the motions while quietly preparing for departure. I sold off unnecessary belongings, sorted paperwork, and booked my one-way ticket. Each step felt like a release, a quiet rebellion against everything that had been draining me for 2 years. Meanwhile, Sabrina grew more distant. She spent more time out with Hector, less time checking in with me. Her indifference made it easier to detach. I stopped asking questions. I stopped caring where she went. She seemed satisfied with that, mistaking my silence for resignation. Then came Friday night. She was out again, with friends, she had said, though I knew Hector was there. Around 10 p.m., as I sat in the airport lounge waiting for my flight, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "Where are you?" The timing was almost comical. She probably expected me to be sulking at home, waiting for her return. Instead, I lifted my phone, angled the camera, and snapped a photo. Me reclining in the first-class lounge of Dubai International Airport, boarding pass visible in my hand, glass of champagne on the table beside me. Underneath, I typed, "Job transfer accepted. Ticket one way." I hit send. For a moment, I just stared at the message thread. I imagined her face when she saw it, her smug certainty cracking, her illusion of control dissolving. No explanations. No drawn-out arguments. Just a simple, undeniable fact. I was gone. As boarding was announced, I felt lighter than I had in years. I walked toward the gate, each step carrying me further from a relationship built on disrespect and manipulation. I didn't know what waited for me in Dubai, but I knew what I was leaving behind, and that was enough. When I stepped off the plane into Dubai's heat, it felt like I was walking into another life. The airport alone radiated scale and ambition. Towers of glass and steel stretched out beyond the runways, and even at midnight, the city seemed awake. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about Sabrina or Hector. I was thinking about what came next. The company didn't waste time. They had booked me into a service department near the financial district, sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking chic Zayed Road. Within days, I was absorbed into meetings, strategy sessions, and endless introductions. The workload was heavy, but I thrived on it. My new role wasn't just about managing numbers. It was about shaping the future of an entire branch. After years of feeling undervalued in the shadow of Sabrina's dramas, I finally had a sense of purpose again. But ghosts don't disappear overnight. Sabrina's name still popped up on my phone. The morning after I sent her that airport selfie, she called me 11 times in a row. By the 12th, she left a voicemail, her voice trembling between rage and disbelief. She accused me of humiliating her, of running away like a coward, of blindsiding her with no explanation. I didn't respond. Over the following week, her tone shifted. The angry texts turned to pleading ones. Then came the long emails, carefully written, painting herself as misunderstood. She said Hector was just a friend, and that I had overreacted. She begged me to reconsider, promising she could set boundaries. I read every word once, then archived them. I had no intention of being pulled back into that cycle. Still, I would be lying if I said her absence didn't leave a hollow space. After 2 years, even dysfunction becomes routine. Some nights I found myself staring at the skyline from my apartment, wondering what she was doing. But those thoughts grew weaker each time I immersed myself in work. Dubai had a way of distracting you. The city buzzed with opportunity, fueled by ambition. My team was composed of sharp, driven people from across the globe. One of them, Mireille, stood out. She wasn't a co-worker exactly. She was an external consultant, a French-Lebanese lawyer specializing in corporate compliance. The first time we met, she cut through a heated negotiation with such calm precision that the entire room fell silent. She wasn't just intelligent. She carried herself with quiet authority, a presence that commanded respect without raising her voice. We crossed paths again when she was reviewing contracts for our office. I invited her for coffee as a courtesy, expecting small talk. Instead, we ended up discussing everything from business law to the hidden corners of the city. She showed me neighborhoods outside the polished business centers, places where culture thrived beyond the skyscrapers. For the first time since leaving home, I felt like I had a friend who wasn't tied to my past. Meanwhile, Sabrina wasn't letting go. A month after my move, she managed to reach me through a different number. I answered without recognizing it. Her voice was frantic. She accused me of ruining her life, claimed Hector had manipulated her, and said she had no one left to turn to. Apparently, Hector had been pressuring her into co-signing on investments that turned out to be loans. She admitted she was drowning in debt. I listened in silence. Every part of me wanted to say something sharp, to remind her how many times she had chosen him over me. But I didn't. I simply said, "You'll figure it out," and hung up. That call left me unsettled, not because I wanted her back, but because I realized how fast her world was unraveling. And part of me wondered whether Hector's business was even legal. He had always struck me as someone who lived on charm and shortcuts. I tried not to dwell on it. Life in Dubai demanded attention. My workload expanded, and with it, my influence. I began sitting at tables with regional directors, closing deals that would have been far beyond my reach back home. The company covered every comfort, housing, transportation, even social events designed to integrate us into the expat community. It was a golden cage in some ways, but one I welcomed. On weekends, Mireille introduced me to circles outside the corporate bubble. Artists, entrepreneurs, and academics gathered in tucked-away cafes, trading ideas late into the night. It was a side of Dubai most business travelers never saw, and it grounded me. Through those connections, I started investing in small ventures, tech startups, logistics services, always with Mireille's legal guidance. For the first time, my money wasn't just sitting in accounts. It was building something tangible. Sabrina's shadow returned in bursts. Another voicemail. Another desperate email. Once, she even tried reaching me through my sister back home. My sister forwarded me the message, unimpressed. Sabrina had written a sob story about betrayal, claiming I had abandoned her for luxury. My sister replied with one sentence, "He owes you nothing." That solidarity felt like a final nail in the coffin. Then came the twist. It was a Thursday evening. I had just wrapped up a long meeting and was preparing to head home when I noticed a missed call from an unknown international number. Minutes later, an email arrived. No subject line, just an attachment and a few words. "Thought you should see this." The attachment was a scanned document, loan papers signed by Sabrina, but with my name listed as guarantor. My heart sank. I scrolled through line after line, realizing she had attempted to tie me legally to Hector's debts. The dates were from just before I left. If I hadn't moved, if I hadn't cut ties when I did, there was a good chance those papers would have slipped into my lap unnoticed. My chest tightened as I thought about it. She had been willing to risk my career, my finances, everything, just to shield Hector. Suddenly, her calls and emails weren't just desperate, they were dangerous. She hadn't just played with my emotions. She had nearly entangled me in something that could have destroyed the new life I was building. That night, I sat by my apartment window long after the city had gone quiet. The skyline glowed, indifferent to my private storm. I replayed every moment of our relationship, every warning sign I had ignored. The late-night calls, the constant presence of Hector, her dismissal of my concerns, and finally, that one line, "Maybe we shouldn't be together if you can't handle my ex." She had been right, though not in the way she imagined. I couldn't handle her ex, not because of insecurity, but because of survival, and walking away had saved me. By the time the sun rose, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Sabrina wasn't finished. She had lost control of me, lost the shield I might have unknowingly provided, and she wasn't going to let go without dragging me back into her chaos. What I didn't know yet was just how far she was willing to go. I thought distance would be enough to cut ties with Sabrina. Oceans separated us, new responsibilities consumed my days, and every step I took in Dubai was one away from the mess I had left behind. For a while, it worked. I buried myself in my role, expanded my network, and deepened my partnership with Mireille. Life was steady, even promising. Then one morning, I arrived at the office to find the receptionist pale and nervous. She leaned toward me and whispered, "There's someone waiting for you in the lobby." I assumed it was a client or perhaps one of our local partners. But when I stepped into the polished atrium, my blood ran cold. Sabrina was standing there, eyes red, suitcase at her feet, looking like she hadn't slept in days. She spotted me instantly and rushed forward. Security moved to intercept, but she raised her hands, insisting she only wanted to talk. The lobby had gone quiet, employees watching the scene unfold. The last thing I wanted was a public spectacle, so I agreed to 5 minutes in a side room. The moment the door closed, she broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she launched into a frantic monologue. She said Hector had ruined her, that he had dragged her into fraudulent schemes she hadn't understood, that her life was collapsing. She spoke of debt collectors, threats, and a government investigation closing in. She begged me to help her, claiming I was the only person she could trust. I listened in silence. The woman sitting across from me was a shadow of the one who had once dismissed me with a shrug and a line about not being able to handle her ex. Her voice shook, her hands trembled, but my sympathy didn't stir. Instead, I thought about those forged loan papers with my name scrawled on them. Whether she had signed them out of desperation or deceit didn't matter. She had crossed a line. When she finished, I simply said, "You shouldn't be here." Then I opened the door and motioned for security. They escorted her out as she shouted over her shoulder, "You'll regret this, Leonard. He's worse than you know." For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but I brushed it off. In truth, her sudden appearance terrified me. She had crossed borders to find me, dragging Hector's shadow across continents. And if she was telling the truth, then whatever storm surrounded Hector was bigger than I realized. Later that week, Mireille invited me to a private dinner at a friend's villa. It was a small gathering, lawyers, investors, a few local entrepreneurs. Over grilled lamb and wine, the conversation turned to recent financial scandals. One of the guests, a banker, mentioned a name that made me stiffen: Hector. I stayed quiet, listening as the banker explained that Hector had been flagged by international regulators for suspicious transfers. Shell companies, fake contracts, laundering through small businesses. It was a mess, unraveling quickly. The banker speculated that several people tied to Hector might face charges for conspiracy. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Sabrina hadn't been lying about the investigation. On the way home, I confided in Mireille. I told her about Hector, about Sabrina, about the forged loan papers. She listened carefully, her lawyer's mind piecing it together. Finally, she said, "If your name is anywhere on those documents, you need to protect yourself immediately. Even if the signatures are fake, you'll have to prove it." The next day, we filed formal statements with authorities, preemptively disclosing the documents Sabrina had used. Mireille's legal team built a shield around me before the storm could hit. I felt relief, but also anger. The woman I once trusted had almost ruined me, and the man she clung to had turned her into collateral damage. But Sabrina wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, she appeared again, this time outside my apartment building. I spotted her as I returned from work, standing near the entrance with a paper bag clutched in her arms. She rushed to me before I could retreat. "Please, just listen," she pleaded. "I never meant to drag you into this. I didn't know what Hector was doing. I thought it was business. Now they think I'm part of it, and I'm scared." Her words tumbled out like water from a broken pipe. She admitted she had signed things without reading, trusted Hector blindly, and now investigators were circling. She begged me to vouch for her, to tell authorities she was naive, not complicit. I stared at her, stunned by the audacity. "You used my name without my consent," I said. "You tried to tie me to him, and you expect me to help you." She looked at me with wide, desperate eyes. "I was stupid, Leonard. I know that now. But if I go down, they'll destroy me. You don't understand. Hector won't protect me. He'll let me take the fall." That line hit me harder than I expected. It revealed everything. Hector had never cared for her. She was just another shield, another disposable pawn in his schemes. The same man she had chosen over me again and again had left her to burn. But sympathy is not the same as forgiveness. I shook my head, walked past her, and let the security guard at the door handle the rest. Her cries echoed behind me as the elevator doors closed. The following morning, I received a message from Mireille. Attached was a report. Hector had fled his home country. Authorities were tracking him, and Sabrina had been named a person of interest in the investigation. If she was found complicit, she could face charges of fraud and conspiracy. I sat back in my office chair, staring at the report. Karma doesn't always move quickly, but when it does, it hits harder than anything you could plan. Sabrina had once told me I couldn't handle her ex. Now that same ex had pulled her into a whirlpool she couldn't escape. And the irony? By leaving when I did, by walking away without drama, I had avoided being dragged under with her. Still, a part of me wondered, would she try again? Would desperation drive her to risk everything just to cling to me one last time? I didn't have to wonder for long. One evening, as I left the office, I noticed an envelope slipped under the windshield wiper of my car. Inside was a handwritten note. "They're coming for me. If you don't help, I'll tell them you knew everything." I stood frozen in the parking lot, the city lights blurring around me. The note wasn't just desperate, it was a threat. That was the moment I realized Sabrina wasn't just a chapter one had closed. She was a storm still circling, and I was in its path. The note burned in my pocket for hours before I decided what to do. Sabrina's handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged as though her hands had trembled while writing it. "They're coming for me. If you don't help, I'll tell them you knew everything." It wasn't just fear, it was blackmail. I brought the note to Mireille. She read it without blinking, then folded it neatly and placed it back on the table. "She's cornered," she said. "Desperate people lash out. But you have nothing to fear. We've already built a record of disclosure. If she tries to drag you down, it won't stick." Her calm steadied me, but I couldn't ignore the unease. Sabrina wasn't calculating. She was chaotic. A cornered person can do damage even when the outcome is inevitable. I doubled my precautions, changed my numbers, added layers of security at work and home, and informed the authorities of the threat. It was all documented now, every call, every email, every attempt she made to rope me back in. A month later, the storm finally broke. I was attending a corporate gala with Mireille at one of the luxury hotels downtown. The ballroom was filled with the hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and soft music. Midway through the evening, a ripple of whispers spread across the room. Phones lit up as people checked their alerts. Mireille leaned toward me and whispered, "It's Hector." News broke that he had been arrested while trying to leave Cyprus under a false identity. Authorities had been tracking his movements for weeks, and he was caught with fake passports and encrypted hard drives. Within hours, details flooded the press. millions laundered through shell companies, fraudulent investment schemes, and a trail of ruined lives across 3 countries. And at the center of several transactions, Sabrina's name appeared. My phone buzzed with messages from acquaintances back home. Some knew my history with her, others had only vague memories, but everyone wanted to talk. I stayed silent. Watching it unfold from the quiet corner of a glittering gala, I felt a strange detachment, as though I were seeing the final act of a play I had long since exited. Sabrina's fall was swift. The same people who once excused her closeness with Hector now distanced themselves in horror. Her family cut ties publicly, claiming ignorance of her choices. Former friends avoided her. Even online, her name became synonymous with scandal. Photographs surfaced of her entering court buildings, eyes hidden behind dark glasses, flanked by lawyers. She tried one last time to reach me. An email arrived late at night, longer than any before. She wrote that she had been foolish, blinded by Hector's charm, trapped by promises of wealth and importance. She admitted she had betrayed me, confessed she had signed papers without thinking, and begged me to at least confirm to investigators that I had no knowledge of Hector's crimes. The irony was heavy. She wasn't asking me to save her anymore, only to clear myself. I didn't respond. Mireille sent the email straight to the authorities. It became another piece of evidence in the growing pile. Weeks stretched into months. The case expanded, pulling in associates from multiple countries. Hector, once smug and untouchable, appeared in photographs wearing prison uniforms, his grin replaced by a hollow stare. Sabrina, facing charges of conspiracy and fraud, struck a deal to reduce her sentence in exchange for cooperation. Even so, she lost everything: her career, her reputation, her freedom. Meanwhile, my life in Dubai solidified. Work flourished, investments grew, and my bond with Mireille deepened beyond professional partnership. She grounded me, reminded me that strength wasn't about clinging to chaos but about choosing stability and integrity. Together, we built something quiet but steady, far removed from the storms of my past. The final chapter with Sabrina came unexpectedly. A letter arrived by post, forwarded through the company office. It was from her, written from a detention facility. The handwriting was steadier than before, the tone less frantic. She wrote of regret, not just for what she had done to me, but for the choices that had led her here. She admitted that Hector had never loved her, that he had used her as a shield, and that the only person who had ever truly cared for her was the one she pushed away. I read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer. I didn't feel triumph, nor bitterness, only finality. Her words were an echo from a life I no longer lived. Months later, I attended another gala with Mireille. This time, the whispers in the room weren't about scandal, but about opportunity. Deals were being struck, partnerships forged, futures mapped. I stood at the edge of the balcony overlooking the city, the skyline lit like a constellation of ambition. Dubai had become my refuge, my reinvention. I thought back to that night in the airport lounge when I sent Sabrina the photo of my boarding pass. That single act had been the pivot point, the line where my life split into before and after. Before was chaos, jealousy, manipulation, and near ruin. After was clarity, growth, and eventual peace. People often ask whether I ever think of her, whether I wonder what could have been. I don't, because what happened was exactly what needed to happen. She told me once that maybe we shouldn't be together if I couldn't handle her ex. She was right. I couldn't handle her ex, because her ex destroyed her, and I refused to let him destroy me. The consequences were real. Hector sat behind bars, his empire reduced to ashes. Sabrina faced years of rebuilding a life shattered by her own decisions. And me? I walked forward untouched, stronger for having escaped. Karma doesn't need witnesses, but sometimes it delivers its blows so publicly that no one can deny it. And in the end, the only thing left for me to do was keep walking, toward the future, away from the ruins. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.